and just start by saying hello, welcome. I'm happy to see all of your faces today, and hopefully everything is still going as well as can be. Hopefully, no family members have murdered each other in your sleeps or anything like that. I know that my daughter is 11, my son is 8, and my youngest son is 1. So I actually just changed a dirty diaper before I came in here. So this is better. This is better than that. So it's been nice to spend time with family, and it's been, time to spend with family. So hopefully you're able to have a spot that you can go and get away from it all. But just to kind of move this along, I don't know that we'll be here a real long time today, but I do want to make sure we're kind of on the same page with our Marzano and Hattie stuff, knowing about those researchers and knowing from the research, we need to pick out kind of the difference between an instructional strategy and what we call instructional activities or classroom activities. Activities fit into structures, but as a teacher, we're going to ask you to kind of think holistically about the kind of strategies or structures that you want to use in your classroom when you start to design your lesson plans. And then when you design your lesson plans, we want you to put the actual individual classroom activities on there. So there's a difference between the two things. We'll talk about the difference today. We'll also talk about kind of the two of the most preeminent researchers in the field of instructional strategies. And then I'll give you an assignment, and I use that term loosely. As I said, the only things in the end that you're going to need to make sure you have done are those competencies, but this will be an opportunity for you to educate yourself and others eventually about those strategies. So I'll tell you about that opportunity here. And I'll give you time if you want to partner up. If you decide that you'd rather do it by yourself in these times, totally understandable. The only thing I would ask is that when you come back on Thursday, you have that assignment as done as you can make it, and you'll get more information a little bit later on. So let me share my screen with you. Maybe let me take this back to the beginning. So intro to curriculum instruction. By the end of today, what we really want to make sure that you have done is identifying those differences between an instructional strategy and an instructional activity, just as I was kind of talking about there, and become, I'll say, more knowledgeable and compare the work of Robert Marzano and John Hattie. Hopefully, if you had time to kind of skim through / read those documents that I showed to you on Thursday of last week, you'll have at least a little bit of a familiarity with those two guys and the research that they've done. If we were in class right now, we would see this stand-up, hand-up, pair-up. Hard to do a stand-up, hand-up, pair-up on Zoom. So we'll just kind of move through this. And again, the difference between the instructional strategy and the instructional activity. I'm going to stop sharing this document, and I'm going to share with you another one that I showed you, and hopefully that you kind of read over in the last few days. And that is the quick reference page about Marzano. So when we talk about the difference between a high yield strategy and then the actual activity, the strategy is a more broad thing that encompasses a lot of different activities. The two researchers that you're going to learn more about today, Robert Marzano and John Hattie, have spent a good chunk of their lives looking at the most effective strategies to use when you're an educator in a classroom. And as I told you on Thursday, Marzano's identified 9 high-yield strategies. They're located on this document. Hattie's identified many more, dozens more. But they all get down to the same thing. How can you maximize your students' educational experience in the classroom by using research-driven strategies in order to help them retain information and break it down in a more efficient way? So that's the reason for using these strategies. Now, the activities that you can use different activities that fit into the same strategy. So if you think that using identifying similarities and differences in your classroom will help your students learn, and research shows us that it does, there are different ways that you can make it happen. You can have your students do T-charts, Venn diagrams, analogies, compare and contrast. In my classes, I don't remember if I've done it with you specifically, but I use something called a one-word summary or a 6-word essay. And in some cases, those are similarities and differences. In some cases, those fall into summarizing and note-taking, which is another strategy. And there are other activities that you can do within the framework of those. So that's the quick difference between the instructional strategy and the actual activities that you use, okay? When you do your lesson planning, you will need to identify the different strategies that you're using, but you will also, whoops, that's the wrong PowerPoint. But you will also need to, in your lesson plans, write down the actual classroom activities that you're planning on using as well. So you'll have to do both things in the framework of your lesson plan. So again, we're talking about these two guys and the research they've done. Robert Marzano is an American, John Hattie's an Australian, for what it's worth. Robert Marzano was probably the first one to do what they call a meta-analysis of hundreds, if not thousands, of different studies on what made effective teachers. Robert Marzano took these hundreds and thousands of studies and essentially analyzed all of them. So he did an analysis of analyses and came up with the 9 strategies that he found to be the most effective that were identified throughout all of those different research studies that he looked at. And Hattie did the same thing and just identified, as I said, many more than those 9. Again, if you want to read through this, you can, this is another way to talk about the difference between strategies and activities in the classroom. Our learning target for the day is that you're going to be able to identify similarities and differences in Marzano's work and Hattie's work. That's my instructional strategy. If you look at, I literally am saying, I want you to identify similarities and differences, okay? That's the strategy that I want you to use. The activity that I'm going to have you do is to make an anchor chart that describes the differences. That's the actual learning activity, okay? So I'm going to stop sharing this screen for just a moment. I'm going to go back to our classroom website, the course website. Okay, so in our course website, when you go to week 2, the module there, you will see the Marzano-Hattie anchor chart, okay? So what I'm going to ask you to do, you and a partner if you choose, is to create some sort of graphic organizer so that you and your classmates can come to understand the similarities and differences between Hattie's work and Marzano's work in a more effective way. Here's what you need for your chart. It should be organized in some way, neatly designed, and let me show you an example that came from the charts we did in the past. Maybe. Whoop, back. Okay, so you can see that this is going to be tough to do in this day and age. So if you want to do it as a Word document, as a PowerPoint slide, is Prezi still a thing? You know, whatever. I don't know. You can do it however you want. You even can do this on a big piece of paper, take a picture of it and upload it. I don't care how you do it, but the idea of comparing those two researchers with one another is the most important thing. Does that make sense? Kind of give me a thumbs up if you're hearing what I'm saying to you there. Okay, do it however you want, but make those comparisons. Use a partner. I could do a group of 3 if we needed to do that as well. That wouldn't bother me. More than 3 is probably too many. Or 1. You can do it by yourself because, again, these are fairly extraordinary times. So that's one thing that I want you to do. And I'm going to ask you to have that done by Thursday when we come back into class, because I'm going to ask you to share it with multiple other people on Thursday so that we can all get a sense of the research and the similarities and differences between Marzano and Hattie, and we can just kind of break it down in a more effective way. Okay? That's one thing I'm going to ask you to take a look at. The next thing would be, share a screen again. This is also in the week 2 module. Let me get there first. One of the things that we need to have you do, along with those competencies, we need you to identify instructional strategies throughout your time in this course. Now, it becomes a little more difficult to do that because you're not going out to your schools. They're closed. And even if they weren't, I wouldn't let you go out there right now anyway, right? So you can't do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to find different ways for you to observe these instructional activities. Can you see this document that I just put up there? It says Introduction to Curriculum and Assessment, Log of Instructional Strategies. Can you thumbs up if you can see that? Okay. All right. So over the course of what you're going to do this semester, we're going to ask you to keep a track of at least 10 strategies that you see in action. They can be in the classes that you're taking in your college studies. I'm assuming you're Zooming a lot of those classes. So if there are actual activities that you're doing via Zoom, such as this one, you could count the one we're doing today. Let me just go through the example really quickly. You know, the example would be students used a Venn diagram to compare the causes of the Civil War, the causes of World War I. That's what you're seeing them do. When you sit down and think about it, you can look at it and say, well, that is essentially, that's identifying similarities and differences. That's the strategy that's being employed. Then you think, well, that researcher, hey, that was Robert Marzano's work. And then after you look at all of those things, you make kind of a reflection on the effectiveness of the strategy, okay? So for instance, if we were doing it today, then what you would look at is the activity is the anchor chart. The instructional strategy, once again, identifying similarities.
Dr. David, all I'm seeing is like the link for the document. I'm not seeing you if you're actually typing. Itself?
Okay. Anybody else not seeing the document? Okay, let me, okay, sorry. Let me stop sharing again and I'll share the right thing. That's the only mistake I've made today. I've made no other mistakes. Good, there we go. So let's back up. The activity observed as an example, like if you were in a classroom and you saw students using a Venn diagram to compare the causes of the Civil War to the causes of World War I, that's what you would write down under activity observed. Then you would go back to the strategies that you kind of worked through and you'd say, well, that looks like identifying similarities and differences. And you know that that's a Robert Marzano strategy. And then at the end of that, you would make kind of a reflection on how effective that strategy was as the students used it, okay? So that's the example. So an example that I'm giving you that you should probably all write down on your charts is the anchor chart that you're doing in class, okay? That's the activity. The instructional strategy that it's from is identifying similarities and differences, okay? The researcher, once again, Robert Marzano. The effectiveness, you know, what kind of reflection can you make on it, you know? Something like this, probably. You know, I wouldn't write anything too much different from that. But so you'll be on the hook now for 9 more strategies that you see. And as I said, we're going to provide for you, I think through the PLC classes, the PLC 2 classes that you're taking, we're going to provide videos for you to actually do observations, okay? So in the framework of those observations, you're going to find more instructional strategies. Because my suspicion is that we're going to show you exemplar videos, meaning people that are doing things really well. So you're going to probably be able to find multiple instructional strategies and activities in those videos. Does that make sense? So don't stress about not going out into the schools. Maybe stress about that a little bit because that's an experience, obviously, that you're not going to be able to recreate. But we'll do the best that we can, and we'll find those videos to show you, and you'll still be on the hook for those instructional strategies through the videos. Okay, but that's not due until the end of the semester. So you got plenty of time to make that one happen. The assignment about the anchor chart, I'm going to ask you to have that done by Thursday before you come to class, because again, I want to make sure that we are able to share that with each other. Okay. We go back to our course video here. So you got the instructional strategies log, got the anchor chart, the reading that's on there. You've already done that reading. I asked you to do those readings on Thursday, so you could have them kind of in the back of your brain for this assignment today. So when you do the anchor chart, you just go back to those readings. I think there were 4 of them, but I think they're located in the week 1 module. And there were 2 readings about Hattie. There was a Marzano PowerPoint, and then the other document about Marzano that I showed you. You can use Google. If you happen to have their books, you know, they put out a whole bunch of books. I'm sure they're probably not on the shelves in your places right at the moment. If they are, kudos to you. You know, you can use each other as a resource. You can use me if you need to, but start with those readings that I gave to you. Go to Google. There's a lot of stuff about Marzano and Hattie on Google as well. Okay? So, questions about any of that? That's a lot to throw at you in a few moments, but I do want to give you this time to kind of get organized. If you want to do a partnership, you're welcome to. Here's how I did it in the 8 o'clock, and it worked pretty well. If you want to do it by yourself, then at this point in time, you're free to log off, and we'll just see you on Thursday. Okay? If you're wanting to work with a partner and you don't have anybody specific in mind, you can just stay on. And then what I'll do is I will actually randomly group you in breakout rooms, and then you can choose how you get that done with each other in the breakout. Okay? If you don't want to do that, then take care, and we'll see you later. I'm going to stop recording now, and we'll see you on Thursday if you're not hanging around. So take care.